Welcome to the December 1, 2011 broadcast of the Infowars Nightly News. I'm Dykes sitting in. Now, coming up, they are the filmmakers who help bring you What in the World Are They Spraying? It's Paul Wittenberger and his cohort, Chris Maple. So we'll speak with them in just a moment. It's indeed a dark day as the Senate is right now moving, quote, methodically to pass the National Defense Authorization Act. It has just rejected on a vote of 55 to 45 the amendment put forward by Dianne Feinstein to limit the provision for indefinite detention. Senator Rand Paul also worked to keep that out of this massive defense bill as they continue to supposedly try to cut spending. But of course, the consequences are far worse. We are moving more and more towards martial law. This is stuff that has been ongoing for decades, particularly under the George W. Bush administration. There were many moves for indefinite detention and more, all kinds of martial law provisions. John McCain worked with Carl Levin to introduce this current bill. He's also introduced bills in the past for indefinite detention, including of American citizens, the Enemy Belligerent Interrogation, Detention, and Prosecution Act of 2010, for instance, which explicitly named U.S. citizens among those who can be detained intentionally without trial. It's very unfortunate that it looks like they're going to pass. Of course, President Obama has said he would veto this bill if it does pass, but that's a little solace because he's primarily leaning on the overreach of executive powers that presidents have passed the baton on for years. He's actually defending the executive branch's power to indefinitely detain citizens and make the call, even saying that courts have no place to determine whether or not someone should be kept in custody indefinitely or not, that it's solely an executive branch position. So anyway, let's go now to some of the Dianne Feinstein clip asking them not to put the indefinite detention in the bill, again, an amendment which was rejected.
Be protecting Americans, and if we were to pass this amendment, it would create an absurd standard where you get greater rights when you are here on our soil, and I don't think that, I think that makes us less safe.
And this constant push that everything has to be militarized. They were wrong on Hamdi, they were wrong on Hamdan, and it keeps going. And that it is terrible to protect people's rights. I don't think that creates a safe country. This country is special because we have certain values, and due process of law is one of those values.
Of course, the idea behind this bill also brings U.S. military troops closer to American soil, allowing them essentially to operate, and of course putting American citizens, potentially anyone, in the crosshairs of military action. Now I want to read some quote from Kurt Nemo's article, NDAA, Another Step in the Fascist Takeover of America, where he discusses the Senate ready to vote on legislation permitting the U.S. military to capture and indefinitely detain citizens on American soil. Later in the article, he's got a quote from Colorado Senator Mark Udall, very poignant here. I would point out that these provisions raise serious questions as to who we are in society and what our Constitution seeks to protect. Of course, that's the whole point. That's what makes our country different from other tin-pot dictatorships, is things like our Bill of Rights, our individual freedoms, which are not to be infringed upon. But of course, we have a tyrannical government always moving further along. And Kurt Nemo goes on to discuss how if the bill were to become law, not taking into account what Obama may do with the veto, it would allow the state to disappear domestic political enemies the same way dictator Pinochet in Chile eliminated his political opposition. Military kidnappings, torture, and secret execution are the tactics of thugs in place like Nazi Germany, Stalinist Russia, and Communist China, not the United States. Of course, that's true. Just for a little reference, I want to cue a clip from an old movie called Army of Shadows about the French resistance, and they had indefinite detention in those times during World War II, based on a book written in the middle of the war in 1943, before all the Holocaust revelations and the moves to demonize Nazis as though they were the only ones who abused these powers. But anyway, let's cue these clips. So this is a French language film. Here they've got a guard tower over a classical internment camp, something the United States should not transform into. But in this clip, they go on to discuss indefinite detention. And here we go, the head of this internment camp saying you never know who you're going to take in or how to treat them. Some have not been convicted or sentenced and stay indefinitely. Others with terrible records are soon released. Typical corruption to take senior jobs in local government or even at Vichy. And they've got here a map of the camps for internment, and it goes on, and some of the members discuss how they were just ordinary businessmen but got caught up in political demonstrations by accident, but were taken to detention centers, held indefinitely, never got a trial, never got an explanation for why they were held. And this is the kind of thing they're now proposing in the name of the war on terror, which they say is going to go on forever and ever, as long as the Cold War anyway. And now somehow it's going to involve American citizens as well. Very dark days. We'll keep an eye on that. Whatever happens, the fact that they were proposing this and have seriously put it forward is just appalling. In other news, Paul Watson and Yi Han have reported earlier today on Chinese generals threatening a third world war to protect Iran. Both China and Russia have made it clear they will veto any UN authorization of military action against Iran in the aftermath of claims that Iran is on the verge of developing a nuclear weapon. Then that parallels his other article. Chinese government official, U.S. threat to Pakistan is threat to China, and gets into statements from a top military general. It says, according to the report, the United States is massing troops on Pakistan's border in an act of aggression that China sees as a direct threat to its close alliance with the country. In response, China recently sent large numbers of 2nd Artillery PLA troops armed with sophisticated DF-21C and short-range tactical missiles to China's northwest plateau. Anyway, the point being that all the stuff going on in the Middle East is also part of a larger geopolitical ploy for a long endgame struggle with China, Russia, and other sectors of the grand chessboard. But that's the kind of madness we're engaged in foreign policy. Another reason we should scale everything back, a la Ron Paul. But he, of course, is not getting the coverage in the debates. It's people like Newt Gingrich, who we're going to cover in a few moments. Now, in other very dark news, ABC News did an expose of foster children and all the mind-altering drugs they are given. New study shows U.S. government fails to oversee treatment of foster children with mind-altering drugs. We have a number of quotes here. Overall, the GOA looked at nearly 100,000 foster children in 5 states only. 45 other states not studied found nearly 1/3 of foster children were prescribed at least one psychotic drug. The GOA found foster children were prescribed psychotropic drugs at rates up to nearly 5 times higher than non-foster children, with foster children in Texas being the most likely to receive the medications compared with foster children in the other 4 states studied. In Texas, foster children were 53 times more likely to be prescribed 5 or more psychiatric medications at the same time, 5 or more psychiatric medications at the same time than other non-foster children. In Massachusetts, it was 19 times more likely. In Michigan, 15 times more likely. Oregon, 13 times more likely. And in Florida, foster children were 4 times more likely, or as likely, to be given 5 or more psychotropic medications at the same time. This is absolute Nazi experimentation with our children. It's disgusting. The quotes go on here. Foster children were also more than 9 times more likely than non-foster children to be prescribed drugs for which there was no FDA-recommended dose for their age. For the most vulnerable foster children, those less than 1 year old, foster children were nearly twice as likely to be prescribed as a psychiatric drug compared to non-foster children. And it goes on to discuss how these psychotropics were even given to infants. We have a clip from that report now.
These are the meds that I've been taking since I was 4. 1, 2, 3, 11, 12, 13.
Lexapro. The last one is Abilify.
Consider the case of 7-year-old Brooke, taken from a drug-addicted mother, just 43 pounds, but given 5 mind-altering drugs at the same time, a combination that is deemed too risky even for adults. And Brooke went from this, being weaned off the strongest medications, to this.
No adult should be receiving the drugs that different variety, but certainly not at these ages.
And foster parents who want to help soon learn that if they don't give medications, the child can be taken away.
We were told to put our faith in the system, and that's what we did. No one said the medications could be causing the problem. They kept saying she needs more medications.
But in Brooks...
And of course, they're calling this a failure to oversee foster children, where they're much more likely to be abused. CPS custody, far more likely to be abused. The system is not good for children. And of course, this is part of a larger agenda. As we all know, why are they prescribing these things in the first place, but especially in combination with these very vulnerable foster children who don't have good parents to oversee them, et cetera, because of the situation we're in. Now, of course, Alex reported on this in the 2007 film Endgame, and we have a clip there from a top psychiatric official in Texas saying that it was okay that there were children on up to 7 or more psychotropic drugs because they're from a bad gene pool. Yeah, so tell me this isn't part of the eugenics plan.
Planners said that they'd use mind-altering drugs to control the population. By 2007, more than 20% of the U.S. population were on some type of prescription antidepressant. But in the case of foster children, a sector where the state has total control, at least 2/3 are forced to take a cocktail made up of, on average, 7 psychotropic drugs. Chairman of the Texas Society of Psychiatric Physicians, Joe Burkett, testified before the State House Select Committee hearing on psychotropic drugs in foster care and shocked the public when he said that 2/3 of foster children in Texas had been placed on psychiatric drugs because they were very, very sick from a bad gene pool.
A lot of these kids come from bad gene pools. They don't have stable parents making good decisions. Besides the gene pools, they've then been traumatized by abuse, neglect, and problems, and then they've been traumatized by separation, and all those things predispose to mental illness.
The Western world is now implementing eugenics pre-crime policies. Fetus.
Now, if you want to get all judgmental about the parents of these foster children and the irresponsible decisions they may or may not have made, don't forget they've said the family's a disease. Organizations like UNESCO have said that the disease of nationalism is spread through the parents, and that therefore the states and the schools should re-educate the children, influence them, and give them their values, and so on and so forth. You've heard about the Brave New World vision for a drug society that's completely obedient to the state, or dire warning if you want to interpret it that way. Just a terrible story. Good that they did the profile, but of course it's bigger than just this case study. But the GOA study does highlight the fact that they are giving massive amounts of mixed together psychotropic drugs to these poor foster children. Just awful. In political news, the rise of Newt Gingrich is just another sign that the New World Order is still behind the scenes of both political parties. Ron Paul has put out a new ad bringing to light the fact that he's A, hypocritical, a flip-flopper, but B, that his real record is being a globalist for no borders, and so on and so forth. Now, RonPaul2012.com issued this statement, including this quote: "Our campaign is making a bold move to debunk the myth that the Newt we are seeing in the 2012 campaign trail is the conservative he has been touted to be all along. This step we are taking is necessary as voters are seeking authenticity among conservatives who are able to show decades-long career of consistently walking the walk of constitutional principles, limited government, and promoting sound money and economic policy." Ron Paul is the only Republican presidential candidate with that record. And that statement is from Jesse Benton, the national campaign chairman for Ron Paul. And we have now that ad.
I think this is the core challenge of America, is that beyond the words is a real question of policy, and a real question of values, and a real question of seriousness. The real question of policy.
We don't always see eye to eye, do we, Newt?
No, but we do agree our country must take action to address climate change.
Newt Gingrich has been on both sides of a long list of issues, sometimes in the same week.
And I believe we're going to play the entire clip during the break. It's also on Infowars.com. But what are the real policies of Newt Gingrich? You've heard about his third wave plan for America. He wrote the foreword for Alvin and Heidi Toffler's Creating a New Civilization, the Politics of the Third Wave. Some of the quotes from that book include, nationalism is the first wave. The globalization of business and finance required by advancing third-wave economies routinely punctures the national sovereignty the nationalists hold so dear, obviously part of the larger globalist plan. Also, a quote from that book, the Constitution of the United States needs to be reconsidered and altered to create a whole new structure of government, building a third-wave civilization on the wreckage of second-wave institutions involves the design of new, more appropriate political structures. The system that served us so well must, in its turn, die and be replaced. The system they want is rule by elitists and basically little people doing the minion work at best. Now, of course, Newt supported NAFTA, GATT, other United Nations and globalist treaties. He was an advisor for Freddie Mac before they went kaput. And of course, he's a member of Bohemian Grove, the Council on Foreign Relations, and an open border advocate. And so in other open border news, I covered this morning. Secret U.S. Canada border deal hides GMO takeover. Now, this is a beyond borders, border security perimeter deal that Harper and Obama have been secretly working on for more than a year. I covered it back in April. Now they're set to sign the deal, still secret at this point in time, next week, at which point it will become, I guess, treaty law. Now, this bill is significant. Of course, obviously, it's part of the larger North American Union deal that was leaked, that was also pursued in secrecy, started during the George W. Bush administration in 2005. They've had a number of meetings since then. And Harper's been part of this all along. Now, it would merge a large portion of law enforcement and terrorism efforts, allowing Canadians to work on the U.S. side of the border, U.S. personnel to work on the Canadian side of the border. It would also up and legitimize biometric checks at the border, and it would justify surveillance, quote, track everyone coming and leaving Canada by air, land, and sea, giving that power to the United States authorities. But there's more to this secret agreement, and the parts that are known about are because it was leaked to the press. We currently don't know everything about this 32-point border perimeter plan. What's lying in plain sight here is that they also plan to, quote, streamline and harmonize regulations in the automotive and food sectors. Now, this is very significant, especially the food sector portion, because it would probably, most likely, many observers believe, open up Canada to a total assault from the biotechnology companies, Monsanto chief among them. The Council of Canadians reports that what kind of regulatory alignment might we expect to see as a result of the Beyond the Border Action Plan? The Biotechnology Industry Association asked that both countries adopt consistent science-based processes that would significantly decrease the time required for authorization of biotech crops and their products. They've asked for a harmonization of the maximum permissible pesticide residual levels. And again, many Canadians, farmers, and activists among them have successfully repelled a lot of Monsanto's biotech products from being introduced into the company. They fought back against bovine growth hormone, GM alfalfa, and have gotten an investigation into the pesticides. But the biggest pushback was against GM wheat, one of Canada's biggest exports, and that victory came at the hand of the Canadian Wheat Board, which, by the way, was just dismantled earlier this week in time for the Trans-Pacific Pact trade talks. So you've got Canada and the U.S. working on a bilateral open borders trade deal, part of the North American Union. Meanwhile, they're working in the Asian sector for this Trans-Pacific Partnership, all to do these so-called free trade deals, which are not free at all. They create trade blocks. If you don't become a member, then you're essentially discriminated against for your exports. So it's all very interesting. They say the wheat board's probably just the beginning. They're going to go after the dairy and egg boards as well. They won't be satisfied until Viterra and Cargill and Monsanto control every bit of farmland in this country. That's a statement from Member of Parliament Romeo Saganash. Now, these boards in Canada are very socialistic, But at the same time, tariffs are not necessarily socialistic. They're historically part of the American experiment as well. Makes sense, but it's something all this free trade and globalization has sought to do away with or significantly limit. And one more thing about GMO introduction in Canada is the other issue of low-level presence of GM contamination. They are also separately seeking to legitimize the export of crops which are genetically modified and banned in certain countries, such as places in Europe where they will not accept these crops. They're now trying to pressure them to accept low-level contaminated GMO crops, a dangerous, slippery slope towards total introduction of GM crops. Right now, by the way, there's about 30 commercial GM crops. By 2015, a European Commission study estimates there will be more than 120 GMO crops, something to keep an eye on. In financial news, a very significant headline story here. A bank courier van spills money on the roadway in Upper St. Clair, and the police have tried to round up the money after the public grabbed it, and they recovered only $400 out of tens of thousands. The police have issued a statement saying this is not a free-for-all situation. Obviously, this money is bank property. Lieutenant Englert said police intend to give people a reasonable amount of time to come to their senses and return any money they might have taken. After that, they could charge people with theft. But you don't see that treatment on Wall Street or outside the Federal Reserve with all these secret agreements, loans, and outright theft. Also in the news, Naomi Prenz's article published today, the Fed's European Rescue, another backdoor U.S. bank Goldman bailout, where there was more than $7.7 trillion with the T of bank subsidies given to various European banks. And that's just another part of this larger looting that's going to come with the economic collapse. Also, you heard about the MF Global story where they came up short on their European bets, and suddenly the pension money and bank accounts from their customers went missing. Well, now one of the executives from MF Global, who resigned, by the way, in September before the company went bankrupt, has landed a new job. He's a pension manager now on Wall Street. New York City Comptroller John Liu has hired former chief executive of MF Global Holdings to help develop and manage the city's pension investments. MF Global was sued by 4 public pension systems outside New York that claim the firm misrepresented its risk management practices to investors. But now one of those executives has a new cozy job. That would be Kevin Davis, who was quietly hired back in September. Another interesting angle. Now, the Fukushima situation continues to be severe. TEPCO again underplays severity of situation at Fukushima, writes Kurt Nimmo today, bringing up how the Tokyo Electric Power Company is once again trying to mislead the public on the severity of the situation at the crippled Fukushima nuclear plant in Japan. The government is also actively working to sweep the disaster under the rug. Its Ministry of Health, Labor and Welfare recently eliminated Fukushima data from a patient survey it conducts every 3 years, according to the Fukushima Diary. According to the survey, leukemia cases have been increasing 7-fold over the last year, the highest rate since 1978. But there's nothing to see here. Find out who took the banknotes from the road when the truck spilled them out. Now, in other news, there's a new sex scandal. Feds charged 20 with luring illegal immigrants to work in the New York area strip clubs. They're saying it was mob-run with Italian and Russian mobs who arranged sham marriages to bring Eastern European and other illegal immigrants into the country and to work as strippers and exotic dancers. And it doesn't mention prostitution here, but I would imagine that's waiting in the wings. Now, sure, that's a bad scandal. There is lots of illicit mob and sex trade activity going on, especially in that part of the world. It spills over to here, but that's kind of the small part of the iceberg that's above the water level. The large, massive, important part of the iceberg is well below the surface, the thing nobody likes to talk about, but you've heard about it on this program before. Stuff like the homosexual prostitution inquiry that ensnared VIPs within the Reagan and Bush administration. Call boys took midnight tour of the White House. You heard about the gay porn stars serving moguls, including at places like Bohemian Grove. Chad Savage, a guy who later would visit the George W. Bush White House. All of us valets in the Grove are tittering about it, says our Bohemian blabbermouth, to think there's all these powerful conservative guys having their drinks and food served to them by a gay porn star. He makes their beds and attends to their every need, and they have no idea who he really is. Of course, even that's just the tip of the iceberg to all the terrible and satanic sexual slavery stuff going on, including in political circles. There's, of course, all the stuff to do with Penn State and Syracuse, the accusations going on there of molestations and rape. So obviously there's much more going on than just a few strippers at a New York club, but that's the way the news goes. Now, coming up, we have an important group of guests. They are the filmmakers who help bring you What in the World Are They Spraying? It's Paul Wittenberger and his cohort Chris Maple. They are here to interview Alex Jones for their upcoming film, The Great Culling. So we'll speak with them in just a moment. Stay tuned. We'll be back after this break.
If you believe in this information and want to support its viral spread, go to the Infowars store at Infowars.com. We've got the new G.I. Joe Infowars t-shirts. We've got the incredible Pro Pure gravity-fed filters available at Infowars.com in the store. We've got a new DVD, Scientists Under Attack, the Don't Tread on Me flag. We've got all sorts of different bumper stickers to help spread the rebellion virally. It's all there, wristbands, citizen rule books in every order. Order online at Infowars.com today. The water filters, the canteens, it's all there. Infowars.com.
And we are back from break on this first transmission of December 2001 on the Infowars Nightly News. We're joined now by two filmmakers producing The Great Culling. It is a follow-up to What in the World Are They Spraying? Great film on the geoengineering and chemtrail phenomenon. We have it here at the Infowars store. That is director Paul Wittenberg, and he is joined by first-time filmmaker, right, Chris Maple?
That's right.
Thanks for coming on, guys.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Of course. So tell us about the previous film and how it led to the new project.
Well, we finished up What in the World Are They Spraying last year around this time, and we started with this new film, The Great Culling, immediately after. So it's going great. We're just finished up shooting the rest of the interviews, and we're going to go into post and finish this up real quick.
What got us really going into The Great Culling, we did once What in the World Are They Spraying was completed. We kept hearing these the resonation of heavy metal contamination in the air, and we were doing research with the water as well and the fluoride, and again we keep hearing these. The aluminum kept resonating, and it's what got us going with The Great Culling. Because with The Great Culling, in addition to the air, we're also looking at the water as well as the food. So our three essential, life-supporting, components. And so in addition to that, we wanted to focus on the neurological disorders and how they relate to these heavy metal contaminations that are going on today.
Certainly. And you're covering stuff like fluoride, you're covering all the stuff in the vaccines, and really kind of the modern way of life where cancer is almost an expectation or a one out of several kind of deal. And so what are you guys finding? Are there important tie-ins with political dimensions? Does it relate back to this geoengineering plan you've covered so extensively?
I mean, politics does play a role, what we're learning, because at first we weren't completely sure whether or not, this is a big accident or whether there's some design involved here, and that's one thing that we wanted to uncover. And we have. We're finding the deeper we go down the rabbit hole that, there is deceit that is taking place. As far as the, you mentioned vaccinations, that was what really got us going. Personally, myself, it was seeing these children who were being injured. I believe back in 1983, it was when the vaccination schedule went from 10 to 36. I believe it's now 60-something that the kids are taking. And it wasn't until 1986 that the National Childhood Vaccine Injury Act was put into place. And what bothered me the most with that act was that it didn't look at the injured. What it did was protect the manufacturers. So there you have that, corporation is being looked after prior to the people. It wasn't until 1988 that the actual vaccine injury compensation program was created, where they actually started looking at the injured and compensating them. So, and that right there, just, if you look at the timelines from 83 to 86, it's a 3-year period. I mean, when they increased the schedule, a perfect amount of time to see what's taking place with these 36 new shots as far as children now showing up on the autistic spectrum. So, and like I said, what bothered me the most was that they went after protecting the corporations, the manufacturers, prior to looking at the injured. So it was that fuel that really kind of got me up. And I've always been that kind of person who finds myself sticking up for other people. People, sometimes people I don't even know. I can't stand bullies or that sort of things. I found myself throughout my life fighting battles that weren't even mine, just for people who weren't able to fight them themselves, and here we are today.
Yeah. So the film is called The Great Culling. We just were able to witness behind the scenes. You talked to Alex Jones, of course, having worked with him on Endgame. I know he's coming from the eugenics angle, and what really gets me there is stuff like the Gates Foundation and all their overlays. There's questions about GMO foods. They're backing it. There's questions about geoengineering. What are they spraying? Gates Foundation is part of it. They're pushing vaccinations worldwide. Does it all begin to coalesce into a larger plan, or where exactly do you think this is going?
I think it's a mass culling. I mean, personally, I don't believe that it has anything to do with weather modification. I don't believe in climate control. Personally, I just, as we're learning, as they're blanketing, the landscape and the air above us, of course it's coming down on us eventually, because it's evident in the pH levels in the soils. You have companies like Monsanto, as you know, who are already patented aluminum-resistant seeds. Personally, I think it's much more sinister than just cooling the planet, because as we're learning, it's not cooling the planet. It's having an inverse effect. It's actually heating the planet up with the aerosols.
I mean, it really is a huge topic, and so I think it's important to cover these different issues like vaccines and chemtrails and fluoride, and,
GMOs, right?
Yeah, and just wake the people up, because it's such an important thing that people know.
Somebody needs to do it.
Yeah.
And with the help, with the hope with this film is that personally, I'm not a filmmaker. I'm a photographer. Paul's the filmmaker. He's a dear friend of mine. I've known him for quite some time. I worked a little with him behind the scenes on What in the World, as far as with edits and making suggestions and that sort of thing. And it's just a matter of awareness, raising the conscious level of society, right? And I think, I'm a pretty good example of somebody saying enough's enough. I feel now compelled, I got to do something. Not everybody has to go out and make a documentary film either. I just think pushing the knowledge, having people get out there, do the research for themselves, and once they can just become aware of it, because a lot of folks will say, well, what can one man do? What am I going to do, Chris? What do you think you're going to do? And what I'll say to them is, look, it's not a matter of going out and doing something. You do need to get off your butt, do a little research. Don't just regurgitate, what mainstream media is.
Everybody does, but that's what's great about the internet age. You can make a film very cheaply, or you could do a blog for free and get the word out. And the information's out there too. You just have to discover it and put it together and try to understand what's going on. So let's highlight some of the hard information we're going to get into in this film. I know it's still under production and probably still developing as well, but tell us a little more.
Well, we've met with a wide range of folks. We've met with former Senator Karen Johnson and over in Arizona, right? And she was great. She one thing that she opened our eyes to is when she was in office. She said that it only took between 5 and 7 people calling in to her office, making a stink about something, to raise awareness within her office. If they got 5 to 7 phone calls on an issue, that was priority of the day.
Sure.
So, and that really made me step back and say, wow, I mean, you really don't need 1 million people marching in the street. It was just a simple 5 people making phone calls to their local, legislator and making a complaint or a suggestion or something of that nature. So that was an eye-opener for us to realize that, wow, there might be some hope as far as awareness. Also, what do we have? Dr. Rima Labau. She is down in Panama City, the Highlands of Panama right now, and she gave us a great interview. And it's kind of where we got the title of the film was a phrase that she had stated on an interview that she had done with Jesse Ventura. I believe his show, The Conspiracy Theory.
Yeah, Conspiracy Theory.
Right, exactly. And she said, one of her patients at the time was a head of state. She had mentioned, be prepared for the great culling. It's about to begin. Yeah. And Dr. Labau was, what do you mean, the great culling? And she eventually got herself out of America. But Clifford Carnicom, we talked with him as well. He went over contrail science with us, how contrails formed, what's the difference between these aerosols that we're seeing, and what is a true contrail. That's something that we're trying to focus on as well, because it doesn't take much for people to go outside and just take a mental observation on a daily basis, just to take a peek up and look what's going on above your head. Start, realizing that, why does this one have a tail? Why is this one not? What's different today than yesterday? Where are all these planes today? They were spraying yesterday. There's nothing up there today. So he shed some light there. Paul Connett, Dr. Connett, again. He's a huge fluoride, anti-fluoride promoter. He enlightened us as far as...
we'll get into why fluoride is so important as an issue.
Why it's important?
Yeah.
Why is it so bad, or why is it so important?
Well, I mean, what are you exploring in the film specifically?
With the fluoride, what we're learning is, through the fluoride, what it's doing is it's wearing down the myelin sheath, which is the fatty insulation that surrounds all our nerve endings. So we are having electrical short-outs with the fluoride and the aluminum. All these metals are wearing down the myelin sheath within our body. And as you know, on the atomic level, we're energy. We're vibrating. This is kind of where the film kind of got a lot of its its fuel from is the energy sources that we're surrounded by energy. And as you know, Nikola Tesla had figured that out at the turn of the 20th century. And not only are we surrounded, but we're made up of it. And when you have a thought to wiggle your toes or speak, it's an electrical current, and it doesn't just stay within your body. It actually escapes throughout the universe. And what better way to shut down those currents and disrupt them than with metals? And that was our hunch all along. And the more and more we dig down this hole and speak with all these these PhDs and dentists and that sort of thing, they're like, yeah, you're right on the mark. It is wearing down the myelin sheath. Our short, we're basically shorting out.
Well, it's what others have called dumbing us down.
Perfect. Yeah. So. And with the fluoride, as you mentioned, and I tell people all the time, I say, well, if this stuff doesn't bother you, then you can thank your fluoride for that, because it does make you complacent.
And it's like the GMO studies. The studies show it causes organ failure, sterility, but they won't label it. So there's that deniability factor, no tracing. You can't prove that's what caused your problems. And so it's a soft kill, it hits everyone and a kind of scattershot. Yeah.
And a lot of people, are concerned with, well, heck, I don't drink tap water. I drink this bottled water right here. I don't drink tap water. A lot of people these days say, I don't drink tap water. I don't even drink it. But are you bathing in it? Our skin is one of the biggest organs that we have. It's going to absorb it. Are you watering your garden with fluoride-free water, or is it...
cooking with it, or buying food that was cooked with it.
You cook it
ready. Everything.
It's in everything.
Yeah.
It is. I mean, your orange juice, your milk, your beer, anything with water, is going to have the fluoride. You just can't get away from it. We thought that possibly through distillation we were able to remove it, but it doesn't. There's still small amounts of traces. Paul and I took the liberty of testing all the bottle, as many as we could, right? The bottled water industry, we targeted that, and everything we tested had traces of fluoride in it, some higher than the tap water.
Well, obviously there's a lot going on. We're very interested to see how the film develops, and you're still taking influence and support for the film. Tell them about the website.
Yeah, the website is thegreatculling.org, and if you folks can get on the website, take a look around. We've put a lot of information up there. We have some stills, and we're looking for support as well. We kind of want to wrap this thing up. We anticipated December, but we're just a two-man show, and we have other jobs that we need to do to try to fund this thing on our own. Yep. And so I think now we're kind of pushing it to March, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and so right now we're just really giving a call out to get people in to help us, and so we can get this thing done and out to the public.
Yeah. And it's worth doing. The last film, I know, woke up a lot of people, got them to focus on the issue and say, well, there's credible reason for these questions, and I think it's awakening a lot of people who haven't studied it in depth, but have kind of heard about it in passing, and hopefully this film will do a lot of the same thing. The Great Culling, coming soon, I guess.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for joining us, guys, and good luck. And that's it for tonight's Infowars Nightly News. Don't forget about our Christmas specials for PrisonPlanet.tv. You can get a heavily discounted membership or the membership with the 18 DVDs, Alex Jones films, you can give to friends and family in the holiday season. Check it out on Infowars.com or get a Prison Planet membership. Support this broadcast and share it with 5 other friends as well. We'll see you tomorrow. Good night.